My lords, I bring you an emergency report. The Shroud is in turmoil. I think they've even killed one of the gods. We have picked up a transmission of unknown origin. I shall play a snippet of it for you now.
Grant us more power.
Clearly, we have witnessed something terrible occurring. Whatever or whoever these aliens are, it can only be bad news for us. I recommend we bring the fleets to readiness, rally our defences, and prepare to meet them with the full strength of the Empire. If we falter now, it will not just be our worlds that burn, but the future of our very species. My lords, on the 22nd of September, a great change will come to our galaxy in the form of Shadows of the Shroud. We will be able to delve into the Shroud like never before, and, as I discovered midway through writing this report, I'm fairly confident Whispers of the Void is dead. But I'll circle back to that shortly. I'll summarise all of the new content we are getting before going into the specifics in detail about what we know so far. To sum up, Shadows of the Shroud will unlock 3 new origins: Endbringers, Mindwardens, and Shroud Forged. Shroud Forged will essentially grant psionic access to Gestalt machine intelligences. Endbringers and Mindwardens will touch on later in the report. There'll be 6 new civics with various subtypes. So the first is Chosen, and the subtypes are displayed on screen. Entropy Drinkers is the next one, very vampire-y sounding. Experimental Sentencing, Secret Societies, Superstitious Beliefs, and Tank-Bound, or Corporate Think Tank. We'll get an enhanced psionic ascension situation, which will culminate in an advanced psionic government form. There'll be a new system for delving into the Shroud itself, including deeds, accords, callings, and covenants. We'll get access to psionic auras and seals, and there'll be new patrons and entities that we'll encounter in the Shroud, and expanded content for old acquaintances. There'll be an expanded end of the cycle, new psionic traits, psionic portraits that will reflect the change once their psionic potential has been unleashed, which is really cool. There'll be the 2 new ship sets that we saw last week, the Mindwarden and the Psionic, and then we'll get new psionically themed artwork, including rooms, music tracks, advisors, and more. Clearly we've got a lot to unpack and a lot to get through. Let's start with the new Shroud mechanics and patrons. We know from previous leaks that we'll have access to 1 new major patron, as well as several minor ones, and I assume looking at this graphic the icons represent the different gods. We can see the big 4 here: the Eater, Instrument, Whispers, and Composers. Except I don't think it is the Whispers, but I'll come back to that. We have 8 more and then 2 on the side, and I assume the Animator of Clay is represented here, and perhaps one of them is also the end of the cycle. As for what the others represent, it's not entirely clear at this point. We have a star, a wave, a river, a cog, a throne, a pyramid looking thing, possibly a black hole, some sort of creature, a man or an alien. I suspect they all represent some sort of ethic type path, whereby meeting with them, perhaps pacting with them, we'll be able to forge our own journey through the Shroud as we try to master on it. Now, speculating on these new Shroud mechanics, it appears that we can interact with more than 1 patron at any given time. We also have the Cradle of Souls, but it's taking up one of what I would assume to have been the 4 major slots. Maybe it's new. Wait, is Whispers dead? Blue normally represents Whispers in the Void. This is now called the Cradle of Souls. This is a massive potential Shroud change if gods are being toppled. That could be quite the shock indeed, and I only just found out about it as I'm writing this script. I think it is potentially mind-blowing to assume that they've killed one of the gods, or replaced it somehow. I wonder why, and I wonder if I'm even correct about this. I'm only going off assumptions based on what I've seen in the development diary. But back to the new graphic. We can also see on top of the 4 major patrons that there is a list of minor ones underneath. Given the graphic, I assume that we'll be able to have multiple minor ones and that they'll give us bonuses. How we find them and interact with them at this stage, I don't know, and I wonder if based on the graphic the minor ones will have relationships with the major ones. Perhaps some would favour the eater over the instrument, and it will be a little bit like generals and sergeants or something along those lines. That could certainly make sense in a psionic hierarchy standpoint. We also will appear to gain access to psionic auras, and these, I'm told, will affect all fleets and colonies within the system it occupies. But in this context, it's not entirely clear how that works. I imagine it will be perhaps through a starbase building or maybe a planet. How will we project those auras? I'm not sure yet, but it does seem like we can upgrade it. There's a clear Tier 1 and Tier 2. Psionic hives and psionic machines are 100% confirmed, though machines may be only through a specific origin. The graphic that we're shown here is the Zithorian consciousness, a hive mind, who clearly is psionic, with the gift of the composer on top of it. I assume, based on what we've been told, that hives will simply be able to select psionic ascension without restrictions. Machines, though, I think based on what we've been shown so far, will need to be using the Shroud-touched origin. This is one of the new origins with Shadows of the Shroud, and one that seems to be tied to the infamous Animator of Clay. Cut off from the central machine intelligence, the demands of these machines are ever increasing. It will be very interesting to see how that origin plays out, and I really hope there's some massive narrative potentials with the Animator of Clay here. I suspect it will be somewhat of a follow-up of the Zevox dig site, where the animator cuts off several drones from their Gestalt hive mind and sort of gifts them individuality, but doesn't quite go as far to make them psionic in that case. It will be really wonderful to see how the machine intelligence is able to interact with the Shroud. Amusingly, we're shown here the text of XT489 ascending. It's identified as a Class 4 psionic unit, and given the Stellaris naming system, a Class 4 psionic unit could certainly have implications. I wonder what they might be. We are teased with 19 new advanced government types, although if I was guessing, I'd suggest there's probably only 6, and they're flavoured differently for Hive, Machine, Organic and Megacorp empires. But sadly at this point, beyond the icons, we don't know anything about them. The next tease we are given is the new end of the cycle interactions, alongside a new origin, the Endbringers. The Endbringers, we are told, is a challenging origin that can bargain to delay the inevitable and acquire even more benefits from this unfathomable pact. Well, looking at this new origin, I'd guess that the Empire starts pre-pacted with the end of the cycle, the strongest by far of all of the Shroud gods, and in theory by far the most deadly. Clearly some of the mechanics have to change though, because previously this would mean the Empire only has 50 years before they are utterly annihilated by said entity. I assume that perhaps by feeding it you'll be able to attempt to starve off execution, or it would be an extremely short and challenging origin indeed. Again, I cannot contain my excitement about the interactions we'll have between the end of the cycle and the player Empire. I sincerely hope that we're going to be able to learn more about it. Perhaps even it's going to give some weight to the Zeroni origin theory. There also, I think really excitingly, appears to be a counter to the end of the cycle, in the form of the Mindwardens. The Mindwardens will be the second origin, the third in total if you include the Shroud-touched machines. Mindwardens is available either as an established enclave sworn to combat and contain psionic threats, or as a challenging origin, where you work to establish the first Mindwarden order. We've seen a bunch of different Mindwarden ships now, and it's confirmed that we'll get access to their ship set. Here's a smattering of the ship designs that have already been leaked. The Mindwardens appear to be an anti-Shroud species or faction. They suggest that the Shroud is composed of an extremely harmful psionic energy, and they acknowledge it touches every part of the known physical galaxy. They go on to state that the Shroud is unpredictable and extremely dangerous. I stated in the last report that the Mindwarden shipset looks unreal. They seem to be the gift that keeps on giving, as the faction themselves looks really interesting as well. I hope we'll have the reasons for what drove them to hate the Shroud, and I hope that by playing them we'll get a unique insight into the beings that occupy the Shroud. I'm potentially getting sort of Grey Knight vibes here, perhaps even touching on the Jedi maybe. It's going to be fantastic to get into these. The final thing I want to touch on is my appreciation for the continuality between the Season 9 trailers. The Shadows of the Shroud trailer starts with how biogenesis ends, And this new species, a new threat perhaps, really encompasses a new potential player on the galactic stage. I'd encourage you to check out the trailers in full over on the Stellaris official YouTube channel. They're really, really good. I'll be back on Thursday to talk about the new Psionic Ascension situation, explore the Shroud panel, discuss how to influence the relationships that you have with the entities that you may find, and hopefully we'll get to see a sneak peek of some of the new civics. I'd encourage you to subscribe if you're not already, so you don't miss out.